All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. So, got a couple of great topics we're going to jump into here today. The first is something that came to me as a result of a conversation I was having with somebody recently. And the topic was, should you take a political stance with your brand, right? You know, we're all on social media. We're all talking about a variety of things. And politics is often a huge part of that for a lot of people. But from a brand perspective, from a PR perspective, is this something we should be doing? And, you know, a little bit of backstory here. A friend of mine reached out, asked me about a post that he had seen where another publicist was taking a very political, very aggressive stance on a particular topic. Now, this could be perceived as bias, but I believe that the stance that this particular person was taking was completely wrong. But that is wholly irrelevant to the topic at hand, right? We've all got our own personal biases. We've all got our own personal views on things. We have to look at this less from the perspective of whether we should be talking about politics and more from the perspective of what we're trying to accomplish. So one of the things I want to touch on before we jump into deciding how, where, and when it may or may not be appropriate to discuss politics, let's first talk about the company versus personal brand aspect. Now, these are two very different things. Every company has a brand, and whether you like it or not, every single one of us as an entrepreneur, or hell, even as an employee, we all have a personal brand. Our activity on social media, how we engage with people, the things that we do and say and believe, all creates a foundational role in our brand, right? All of these things have a tremendous impact. And frankly, both of them are very deeply interconnected today. So it used to be that a large company might have a brand, but what went on behind the scenes, what the founders believed, what the founders stood for, in a lot of cases, you didn't know, right? They were generally, from a public-facing perspective, apolitical. And that's not really the case anymore, right? With social media, with the way that everything is interconnected, everyone has access to information everywhere, 24/7. Basically, our entire lives are documented online in a very public way. Everything now is all intertwined. There's no such thing as not taking a stance, not having an opinion. So, you know, a couple of case studies we can look at for an example of that is, two that have been in the news a lot lately is Elon Musk. Whether you love him or hate him, you absolutely know what his politics are. You absolutely know where he stands on things. You know what he believes. You know what he's trying to do, both as a company and as an individual. And in both cases, his personal beliefs do shape what happens with his companies. You know, you can see that with the insane vandalism and frankly, terrorism, where people are attacking his cars, not even his cars, they're cars owned by individual people, right? But, burning down Tesla dealerships, things like that. And, that's a case where, right or wrong, this is how it plays out in the real world. If you take a stance on something, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, and it will have an impact in some way, shape, or form. Ben and Jerry's is another example. So I cannot for the life of me remember the guy's name, but one of the founders. I would have to guess either Ben or Jerry. But essentially, he has taken a lot of very political stances on a lot of topics and very aggressive, so much so to the point where the board of directors recently ousted him from his position. So he no longer has a leadership role in the company that he founded because he's taken a very aggressive political stance and it has caused tremendous damage to the brand. At no point did, the companies behind these come out and say anything. It was the individual people. And so that goes to show you how much of an impact what you do and say, and frankly, even just believe, can have when it comes to public relations and the impact on your brand. So let's talk a little bit about what goes into the decision process, right? Should you talk about politics, whether it's, on your social media, whether it's at an event, whether it's, you're quoted in an article or on TV or whatever. Should you discuss politics? So the first thing is to look at something that I call your 5 pillars. Now, this is a concept I came up with years ago where you basically identify 5 core foundational beliefs, things that you're passionate about, things that you are working to change or improve or expand, whatever the case may be, or fight, whatever it may be. Those 5 pillars, your core beliefs. If a political topic does not fall directly into one of those, maybe it's best not to discuss politics, right? Maybe there's no benefit to that. If there's a direct connection to your industry, that's a case where maybe it does, right? Like, so if you're in the SEO industry, or if you're in the real estate industry, or the credit industry, whatever it is that you may be doing, if that particular political topic directly affects your industry, even if it doesn't directly affect one of your 5 pillars, then it may make sense to discuss that. But if we're going to do that, we have to take as objective as possible, right? You're never going to get completely objective, because we all have a bias to ourselves, to our beliefs, to our feelings and emotions. So we have to look at this from a risk assessment perspective. The first thing you want to look at is there any real upside? Are you talking about a thing just to vent, just to get your feelings out there, just so that people know what you're saying, so that, they can see that you think or believe a certain thing? If that's the case, there's probably not any real upside. There's no benefit to doing that, but there absolutely can be some blowback, right? You could have people who are pissed off about what you believe, pissed off about what you're saying, and they can come attack you. We've seen this time and time again. You say something, somebody doesn't like it, especially if it ends up going viral, and then they start attacking your business online, not just in comments and whatnot, like on social media, but they may even come over to your, let's say, your Google business profile or your reviews on Facebook and start attacking your company there, start, trying to damage the reputation of your company, which then has long-lasting business impact. So we want to avoid that if there's no upside. So in a case like that, it might make sense to just, whatever it is you believe, whatever that cause is, maybe it makes more sense to just support it behind the scenes and not really get into a public discussion about it. If you happen to find yourself in a situation where people are essentially demanding that you comment on a thing, which, look, let's be honest, unfortunately, that does happen a lot, then it might be a good idea to just, frame it from the perspective of, look, we do X, Y, Z. This is our core focus. We don't really have an opinion on this, or we really don't want to wade into the debate, whatever, right? You're not taking a stand one way or the other. You're focusing on your core business, whether it's a product or service, whatever your mission is, right? So that's, in a lot of cases, going to be your best bet. The other thing you have to look at is, who is your audience? So you may have a particular belief, but what happens if your audience doesn't share that, right? Do you want to alienate a large portion of your audience? In a lot of cases, the answer is going to be no, unless you've got a plan to replace those potential customers with a completely different audience in a very short period of time. And that's a lot easier said than done. So I would generally advise against doing that. So what you have to think about here is that whatever it is that attracts somebody to you is the same thing that's going to repel somebody else from you. So you can't really take a stance on a thing and just think that's going to pull in the people who believe that, because what it's going to also do is push away the people who don't believe that. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. Everything that attracts one group will, by default, just by human psychology, push another group away, and vice versa. So you have to really weigh this out in terms of who you're trying to attract, who you're trying to serve. So, what is it that they care about? And beyond that, what is it that they don't care about? Is there really a lot of upside in making a big public stand on something that your audience doesn't care about? right? If it's something that they don't give a shit about and you're making a huge deal out of it, there's a good chance they'll get tired of seeing that, right? I'm seeing a lot of that right now on social media where I'm seeing certain people who I, used to like and respect, who are just constantly complaining about certain things. All they're doing is attacking, and it's not even debating the merits of an issue. It's just this childish, juvenile name calling and attacking and stuff like that. And I'm looking at these people and thinking to myself, oh, great. I know that this person is emotionally unstable. I know that they're irrational. And I don't necessarily even disagree with their views on that person, but like, what are you gaining by doing that? So when you're doing that, you're making this huge spectacle out of something that often doesn't benefit you in any way. It doesn't benefit anyone. It's just childish. So in a lot of cases, you have to look at not only what does your audience care about, but also what do they not care about? And then look at what you're trying to accomplish. So if let's say you're a consultant, right? Maybe you're providing cybersecurity advice to your clients. What benefit is there to sit there all day and blast a particular politician? What are you accomplishing by that, right? Unless they're, pushing something where it's like, hey, everything you ever do online has to be connected directly back to you, and we have to know who it is, and da da da. Well, clearly that's a privacy issue, and that should absolutely be addressed. But if it's just, hey, this person is terrible and I hate them, well, that's not going to accomplish anything for you. So you have to look at what the goal is, and your emotions are not a factor, right? You may hate a politician, you may hate a cause, you may hate a particular ideology, but just sitting there blasting it all day does nothing for your brand. It's not going to accomplish anything. So if you're going to take a political stand in a way that could potentially affect your brand, you have to identify a quantifiable goal. What benefit is this going to bring to your business? How is it going to move the needle from a revenue perspective, from a partnership perspective, from a exposure perspective? But when it comes to exposure, let's be clear. We don't want to just jump on topics because there's a shitload of engagement and people are talking about it, right? That's a concept called newsjacking, and it is an incredibly powerful tactic. But we have to be careful when and where we use that, because you don't want to just jump on a topic because everyone's talking about it if you don't fully understand the impact that it could have. Great example of this was Entenmann's Donuts. And God, for the life of me, I cannot remember exactly what the details were, and it's not political at all. But in this case, it was following the Casey Anthony trial. And they jumped on a hashtag on X, Twitter back then, because everybody was talking about it. It was the number one trending topic. They jumped on that hashtag because it was trending, not knowing what it was actually about. And they tried to connect that hashtag, which was actually about the murder of that little girl, to their donuts. And it absolutely decimated the brand. They got trashed for months on social media. So we have to be careful not to just jump on things because there's a lot of activity, because there's a lot of traffic, eyeballs, people talking about it and all of that. So we want to be careful. So is it worthwhile? Should you talk about politics online or in any of your publicity or anything like that? The answer is always going to be, it depends. It's going to very much be a case-by-case basis. But if you follow the advice that I gave in this segment, evaluate it from a risk basis. Look at who your audience is. Really break down the pros and cons, and look at what you're trying to accomplish. Then it could be worthwhile. So break it down that way. And if you decide that it is the right call, give it a shot, but be very careful, monitor the results, see how people are responding in real time, right? Don't just do this and then wait and then see, a month later, how do people feel about us? Monitor that in real time so that you can really effectively tailor it or stop or whatever you need to do if it's not going the way that you hoped. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about how to build a list of industry publications that want to feature you. So this is a really important topic because we want to make sure that we're going to get media outlets that are going to be very likely to feature you, and they're going to do a great job of representing you your expertise, creating exposure for you as well. And this is really important because these trade publications, even though they may not have the same reach, the same exposure, the same traffic as some of the giant media outlets like, Fox Business, Newsmax, CNN, any of those big publications, or even the entrepreneurial side, Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, Inc. Magazine. They're not as big as those, but there is a huge benefit to them. There's actually two huge benefits to them. One, just like every other media outlet, they are always looking for great content. But two, it's generally perceived that the bar is set higher because you're being judged by your peers. If you go and you make a quote, you give a quote to a journalist, they're going to generally take that at face value because they're not an expert at what you do. They may cover your industry. They may know a lot about it, but they don't know it to the depth that you do because you're an expert. You're an authority. However, with trade publications, it's different because these are generally being written by other professionals in the industry. They may have some on-staff journalists, and in many cases, especially the larger ones, they will have several staff journalists. But a lot of the people writing the articles, they're actually not, they actually are in the industry, so they understand things at a much deeper level. So if you're saying something that's wrong, if you're saying something that's inaccurate, they're going to call you on that. And this means that if you're pitching a terrible idea, you're giving bad advice, you're presenting bad information, then what tends to happen is you don't get a chance to write for these articles, for these publications. So this is a huge opportunity because if you're being featured in an industry or in a publication that is run by your peers, by other experts in the industry, people will see it as more credible because of that raised bar. So before we jump into the how-to find these outlets, what I want to talk about real quick is how to identify, kind of real or worthwhile outlets versus trash, because let's be honest, there's a lot of it out there. So I'm going to give you guys an example here. This is not, well, we'll skip that. But anyway, what I'm going to show you is an example of a website. Now, the company that runs this publication, it's a really sleazy organization. They actually run this entire network of publications like this, right? They are designed to look very similar to publications that you are already familiar with, right? I don't know if this is showing up real well for you guys. I'm going to try something here to see if we can blow that up for you all a little bit. So if you look at this logo and the content, of course, this probably looks familiar to you, but you've probably never heard of an outlet called the Music Observer, right? Let's go take a look at this, and we'll switch the layout here a little bit so you can see. There you go. You guys have absolutely heard of Rolling Stone. So we're going to pop back to Music Observer for a second, and we can see what they're trying to do here. They're trying to mimic the style of Rolling Stone. And they're doing that because what they do is they offer a service where you pay a fee, and for that fee, you could basically submit whatever fluff bullshit you want to submit. But if you are not, if you're not familiar with this kind of concept of these bullshit sites that pose as legitimate sites, you may not know about that. You may just see this Music Observer, think, hey, this is a great opportunity to get out here and, get featured and demonstrate my expertise. Problem is, you're not actually going to get any exposure. And anybody in that industry is going to know that it's bullshit. So I want to show you guys a few quick things that we can look at to identify if a publication is legit. Now, in this case, Music Observer versus Rolling Stone, it's a no-brainer, right? We know what Rolling Stone is. We don't know what Music Observer is. So we know that it's bogus when we look at how it's trying to present as basically a clone, right? It's trying to pose as Rolling Stone. That's not always going to be the case, though, especially when we're talking about trade publications. So let's take a look at something here real quick. On Music Observer, and we'll switch the layout here as well. This is one of the authors. So typically when you go to an article, if you click on that journalist's name, in this case, we'll use little finger quotes around the journalist. If you go to that journalist's name on one of the articles, typically if you click on their name, then it will bring you up their author page. Now, Vanessa Roberts, great. One of the things I did here was I went and I plugged her name into Google and looked her up. Well, there's nothing from Vanessa Roberts anywhere. There was no social media profiles. There was no articles at other publications. There was nothing. There was no presence. And a lot of times you'll see this where they have a very common name, right? There may be other famous people with that name. And that's kind of an obfuscation approach that these outlets use to create this kind of mask for the bullshit that they're promoting, right? If you make it hard for somebody to find whether this is a real journalist, it can help them kind of pull this scam off. Something else you can do is if you look up at I don't have a screenshot of it here, but if you look up at their the URL when you're on their author page, in a lot of cases it will have the author name in that address bar up top. If the website happens to be built in WordPress, a lot of times they'll just leave the defaults and it might just say author one or guest author or something like that. Like a legitimate publication would never structure it like that. There's a lot of reasons why they won't. SEO is one of them, but there's a lot of reasons why they generally won't leave that default setup. There will be actual names in there. The URL slug will match the name, all of that. So we want to make sure that we check the authors on the site to determine if it's a real outlet, right? So if we look at something here, just to show you guys a little bit, quick little tool, Ahrefs, there's a couple of others, SEMrush, a whole bunch of different SEO tools like that you can use to look up stats on a website. So this is something I like to do when I'm evaluating a website to see, is it a legitimate publication? So, case in point here, we look at the traffic for Music Observer, and it's getting about 343 visitors a month, which is nothing. Whereas the actual Rolling Stone gets about 9.3 million. So what happens here is this, you can use this as an opportunity to look at the traffic and see, because if it's a legitimate publication, they're going to have some level of traffic. It may be in the thousands, it may be tens of thousands, it might even be in the millions, right? You look at a giant publication like, let's say, Inman in the real estate industry, Construction Executive in the commercial building space, things like this, they're generally going to have millions of visitors a month. If you've got a site that's got a few hundred, then it's probably not a legitimate site. All right, so take a look at these and see if a publication has, if it's a legitimate publication before we waste the time of trying to contribute there, because you've got finite resources. You can't just write articles everywhere. You can't just constantly be creating content or trying to get quoted in every publication that's out there. So we've got to pick and choose our battles. So what we're going to talk about now is how to actually find those trade publications that are looking for great content from experts like you. So one of them is you can go into Google or Bing and look up the name of a product or a service in your industry and just go through the search results. Look for publications that are covering that product or that service. You can also take it a step further. Now, by the way, you're typically not going to find what you're looking for in the first page or so, because that's typically going to be filled with the websites of those top websites in your industry. So you may have to dig a bit. I probably wouldn't go much past, page 10, but start digging through those search results. You're going to find a lot of opportunities. You'll find things that you've not heard about before, right? I don't care what industry it is. Even, a lot of you guys know I'm heavily involved in the real estate industry. Every time I go digging, I always find new real estate publications. And it's, in a lot of cases, there's some great ones out there. They're huge that I had never heard of before. So, you dig around, you dig deep enough into the search results, you're absolutely going to find some. And then another approach here is don't just look in that regular main tab on the search results, but also look in the news tab. So if you look just under that search bar in your browser, right underneath that, you'll see a couple of tabs. That's where you'll find the images and the videos and the things like that. Look for the news tab, and you may have to click more just depending on Sometimes Google will show different things in that menu depending on the search term or depending on your activity. But look for that news tab, and that's going to show you specifically outlets that are syndicated in Google News. So dig through the main tab and dig through the news tab. And that's going to apply to all of these examples that I'm going to run through here with you in just a sec. All right. Another option is a name of a leader in your industry. So pick, 10 of the top companies in your industry. Who are your biggest competitors? And then go and look for their names in the search results. And again, you're going to have to dig past the first couple of pages, at least past the first page, because their own stuff is generally going to come up. But as you start to look deeper, you're going to find various things that they've been quoted in. And that's a great way to find other outlets that you've not yet heard of. And again, same thing applies here. You're going to look in the main tab. You're also going to look in that news tab. And if you play with there's a filter in there for the date, right? So, it might be within the last month, within the last year, within the last week, whatever. But you can play with those search results and filter them to pop up different results that may not just show up by a default search. We can also look at your industry plus the term become a contributor. Think about it like this. If a publication is actively looking for contributors, they're generally going to have a page or a link to a form somewhere. There's going to be something on that website encouraging visitors to become contributors. So this is a great way. This is something we used to use a ton when it came to link building back in the day on the SEO side of things. But today, I use this to find outlets that are looking for contributors. We're approaching this from a PR perspective. Same concept applies. It's a great way to find outlets that are specifically actively looking for contributors. All right. The next is you can look up your industry plus any of these terms that are commonly used in a media outlet name, right? Search Engine Journal is a great example of that, right? Search Engine Journal is the top publication in the SEO industry. And, you add these terms. You've also got the business journals. That's not industry specific, it's business specific, but same concept applies there. And they've got them in every state. Blog, forum, review, all of these different terms here. And we'll drop this into the group at some point too here. We'll just put these in that you guys can just copy. But all of these terms are great ways to find industry specific publications. Webmaster Radio is another example, right? Huge podcast network, not a trade publication in the traditional sense, but it's a podcast network, right? But these terms on an industry keyword are a great way to find all kinds of publications that could be willing to cover the content, right? The whatever it is that you're an expert on. So that's another great search opportunity. All right. So this is what you want to do to find these outlets. So we'll talk more in another episode about how to then, reach out to the editors, how to pitch them on you becoming a contributor there, becoming a columnist. This is actually something that I did years ago when I, first got off my deathbed after that health crisis, and I had to get out there and start rebuilding my own brand. I did leverage industry publications in this way, and it's an incredibly powerful technique. All you need to do is you need to find that list of outlets, right? Build that list and then start pitching them. So we'll talk more in a future episode about how to pitch them and how to start getting yourself published in them. But this is your first step, building that list. So I encourage you guys to put some effort into that. Start building that out here. We are going into Q2 here. So this is a great way to really get some momentum as we're kind of coasting through the year here. All right, next up, we're going to talk about how to prepare for a smooth and authoritative TV interview. Now, this is a topic that I'm not going to use the example video, but this is a topic that, it's always important from a PR perspective. You need to be able to give a great interview on television or video podcast because that really demonstrates your expertise. Problem is, if you're not prepared, you're going to botch it. Things are going to go sideways. And I had a perfect example of this recently. Some of you guys have seen it. Several of you guys have commented on it. I was on a panel with 2 other guests and the host, of course. And one of the guests was not prepared at all. And it was really bad. And I'm not going to play the video because it's a friend of a friend, but she definitely made a very poor impression. She hurt her image, and we want to avoid doing that. So we're going to talk about how to avoid that. We're going to talk about how to really present that killer impression, how to demonstrate your expertise and come off as likable, right? So the first thing we want to do is make sure that you know the plan. What are they going to talk to you about? How long is it going to take? What are they going to talk about specifically? All right. So let's talk about the duration first. Generally speaking, a TV segment is going to be about 3 to 5 minutes. Now, in studio, maybe longer. And in some cases, even a remote interview may be longer. My segment, the last TV segment I was on, was about 23 minutes. Being prepared for a 3 to 5 minute segment is a hell of a lot easier than a 20+ minute segment. So know what you're getting into from that perspective, because you are going to have to prepare to have all of that knowledge kind of at your fingertips. And in a lot of cases, you already know what you need to talk about. You just have to have a structure for it. We'll talk about how to build that structure and how to prepare for it in a moment. But the other thing you have to know is, what is the topic? Now, you'll generally know the broader topic. They may give you some high-level questions. They're not going to give you an outline of everything they're going to ask you. That's just not how it works. They'll give you an overall gist of it in most cases. But you need to be prepared for things to change, because they can. And in a lot of cases, it could be at the last minute. Case in point, one of our members in the private community, Darren Carr, great guy. We put him on a Fox Business segment not too long ago. It was on a show called The Big Money Show. And initially, he was in a couple of articles. They loved what he said. We then leveraged that into a TV segment. Now, mind you, this is a national TV show. Huge audience, great impact. But they kind of screwed him at the last minute a little bit by giving him a topic, but then literally about 5 minutes before the segment, they were like, hey, we're going to change gears a little bit here. We're going to have you talk about this other topic, completely unrelated to what they originally wanted to interview him about. He did scramble, pulled everything together. He did fairly well considering the circumstances and considering that he didn't have a lot of TV background. But he did on that interview look a little bit frantic, right? He's got some notes and he's like, down and up, down and up, down and up, checking his notes as they're talking. So it definitely created some problems. That's just a thing that sometimes happens. You have to be prepared to adapt on the fly. And that is the kind of thing that does get easier over time, right? If I go on a TV interview, for me, I can generally jump from topic to topic to topic with little to no preparation. But that's because I'm on TV all the time. That's because I'm constantly being interviewed. So just be ready for it. Know that it's a potential, and do your best to prepare for that in the event that it happens. One of the things you can do to get ready for this, though, the interview in general, not the switching of topics, is to watch the previous segments. And this is generally pretty easy with all the streaming services that we've got available today. We've got YouTube. You can find clips. You can find all kinds of information out there. And what you want to do is pay attention to the style, the direction, and the pattern, right? How does that interviewer typically speak? What kind of questions are they asking? Is it rapid fire, hardball questions, or is it a nice, easygoing conversation? And in most cases, it's going to be the latter. Nobody's trying to do these hardball gotcha type interviews unless you're in politics, or if you're in a PR crisis, of course. But generally speaking, it's going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to be pretty low pressure. You just have to know your information. But look at the direction that they take. Are they following what appears to be a pre-planned list of questions, or are they asking you a question and then based on your answer, then they go deeper down the rabbit hole on those particular topics. That's going to give you a lot of insight as to how you need to prepare for your interview. One of the things we like to do, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, is kind of building a framework for your potential answers so that you're prepared for any direction it might go. And then another thing that we like to do is look at the topic in other outlets, whether it's print, digital, video, whatever the case may be. Look at what other people are saying. What did they already cover? A lot of those topics are probably going to come up in your interview as well, but then also look at what they didn't cover. You want to be able to bring something unique and insightful to the interview. So if you can do that, if you can bring something that no one else is talking about into the interview, not only are you bringing more value, but also it's more likely that that gets shared on social media, on websites, by other publications, whatever. And then it gets a larger reach, which now makes you more valuable to that producer, to that anchor. And you're more likely to be called back, right? When you do a really good job, they want to have you back because you're bringing value to their audience. Now, you need to know your talking points cold. This doesn't mean memorizing some kind of speech, you're probably not going to get prepared questions. Like I said earlier, you'll get the high level topic. You may get some general questions, but you're not going to get a list of questions that they're going to ask you. That's just not how it works. So I want you to come up with 3 talking points, 3 core topics that you want to address in that interview, and then come up with 3 to 5 subtopics for each of those. Now think about this in terms of bullets, not paragraphs. You want to have very short, punchy little pieces of information that will just give you kind of a quick reminder. You should be able to fit this on a 3x5 note card, right? I'm not saying you should necessarily write it down and have it, but you should have the ability to fit it easily on a 3x5 inch note card. And the idea here is not so much that you're using it as notes, but more that you're using it as a framework. You're already an expert at this stuff. You already know this inside and out. So all you need is that framework that you can then kind of riff off of. If I'm talking about public relations and I've got 3 bullet points, I should theoretically be able to cover that for an hour without too much of a problem. For me and a lot of people, really, the challenge is fitting everything that you want to say into that tight little segment. So this is the way we want to approach it. We have a framework, and then we're just kind of going off of how the conversation flows. We've got a general framework, and we're going to let the conversation unfold naturally. To get ready, I want you guys to look at role playing. Now, not in that way, you weirdos. We want to role play from a practice perspective. All right. We want to think of this as a conversation. So you might work with, if you've got a publicist, this is something they should be doing with you. They should be working with you to practice and kind of take the conversation in multiple directions. I've done this with every client we've ever had when they go on TV. We'll get them prepped. We'll work up a framework for them, and then we'll start going through and asking the questions, and we'll throw, kind of odd questions out of the blue. We'll take it in directions they don't expect. And we want to get them comfortable. We want to get them to the point where whatever direction this goes, they're not going to get flapped. They're going to be solid. They're going to be prepared, and they're not really stressing out because they've gone through this so many different ways that it all just becomes second nature. We had a concept similar to this in the military. A lot of people think, oh, well, hey, in the event of an emergency, I'm going to step up and I'm going to do what needs to be done to accomplish that mission. No, it doesn't work that way. You don't step up. You regress to your lowest level of training. So what happens is when everything starts to go sideways and you're anxious and you get something unexpected and things are going haywire, you're not going to just suddenly become calm and zen and just step up and ace that. You're going to go to whatever is your baseline for your maximum training, right? In the military, that's why, they would always train so hard physically, mentally, and get us to the point where we were comfortable with chaos and things blowing up and bullets flying by, and you're uncomfortable and you're hot or you're cold and you're wet and dirty and hungry and tired. You have to be able to operate in that environment. Same thing applies to public relations. So we want to make sure that whatever direction the interview may go, you're going to be able to respond in a cool and collected way. And that's where role playing comes in. Don't sweat it. Just think of it like a conversation. It's just two people having a conversation. It's as simple as that. And on that note, don't overthink it. This is something that everyone does to some degree. But there's a variety of reasons for it. You may think that, oh, well, I said this thing, especially if you look at the video afterwards. Oh, I said this thing and I looked stupid. I had this weird facial expression, or my body reacted weird, or I said something stupid. I misspoke. I stuttered. I did whatever. The truth is, most people never notice most of that, right? They're watching for the big picture, right? They're trying to gain knowledge. They're trying to gain some kind of insight out of whatever it is that you're saying. So as long as you can convey that key message, your little missteps, your facial expressions, your weird quirks that you're overthinking about, pretty much nobody else is going to notice that. And even if they do, it doesn't matter. So look at the big picture. Don't worry too much about the minor details. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's a lot easier to not let a little mistake derail you. I've seen scenarios where somebody's just coasting along. They're doing a great job. And then something goes wrong. They forget something. Their mind blanks. Happens to all of us. It's happened to me. But when that happens, can you recover? Can you let that go, move on to the next thing, and just keep going? Excuse me. So don't let that little mistake derail you. This is something that it could go wrong. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't affect you. It doesn't hurt you. We're all going to make mistakes, but if you don't make a big deal out of it, most other people won't either. And then don't depend on that roadmap. And this is where the role playing that we talked about comes into play. So if you've practiced this enough and you can just have a conversation and pop in and pop out at whatever point in the conversation you need to, you're going to be in a lot stronger position to handle this smoothly. And it's that smoothness where you can talk in a confident manner. You can present great information. You've got everything you need off the top of your head. That lets you come off like an authoritative expert. If you're nervous and you're talking 1,000 miles an hour and you're making all kinds of mistakes, then that's when you start to present a bad impression. And that tends to happen when you're rigidly sticking to a roadmap. So just don't do that. All right. So we're going to close out the show today with Jeremy's PR PSA. And that is, to be perceived as a true expert, you have to clearly demonstrate your expertise. Credentials mean nothing in the real world. And what this means is, that MBA or that special certification or, the fact that you're sitting on a board, none of that stuff matters to anybody who's going to be handing over their money for whatever it is that you provide. What matters to them is that you are the expert that can solve their problem. And the only way to demonstrate that is by demonstrating your expertise, getting out there and sharing useful information that people can take and apply in their world. Even if they never hire you to do anything, even if they never buy anything from you, it's that demonstration of your expertise in a way that people can objectively look at it and say, yes, this is valuable, this benefits me, and I can apply this to achieve whatever outcome. Maybe you're teaching them how to do something, or maybe you're telling them about a new law or regulation that will affect them, or you're telling them about a common mistake that people make in your industry so that they can avoid it and avoid the problems and the costs and the damage that can come from that. When you can demonstrate your expertise in that way, it has a profound impact on how people perceive you, and that's how you develop that authority status. So that's a wrap for today, guys. Look forward to the next episode. If you guys found value in this, I would love it if you would share this. Invite somebody to the group that you think could benefit from it. There is the QR code up there on the screen if you're not already in the group. If you just hit that, it will pop you into our free Facebook group where we stream this content as well as share other useful information. But that'll be a wrap for today, guys. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you all in the next episode.